Hello, everyone. This is Rick with a Pro podcast. Industry leaders share their insights. It's about 5 questions in 9 minutes because hackers never sleep. Richard, I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. Let's start off with question number one. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. So I'm, as you said, Rich Struse, currently the CTO of Tidal Cyber. People in cybersecurity probably best know me from my days at DHS, where I led the creation of the Sticks and Taxi cyber threat intelligence sharing standards, which basically meant I catalyzed a community of a bunch of smart people who got together to figure out how to solve I think, a really important problem. Since then, after DHS, I went on to work at MITRE for 4.5 years, where I coined the term threat-informed defense and stood up MITRE's first privately funded research and development center, the Center for Threat-Informed Defense. And since January, I've gone back to my roots as a serial entrepreneur working at Tidal.
Pretty impressive pedigree and legacy. So we appreciate you being on our little podcast, and we are excited to learn the rest of these questions and anything else we can get from you today. Let's jump into question number two. Why do you love being a cyber professional?
Yeah, well, I think to my mind, the most important thing is that sense that you're doing something important. Cybersecurity is a hugely important part of society at this point, and so much depends upon having robust cybersecurity. So when people get introduced to me and they say inevitably, "Well, what is it you do?" and I say, "Well, I'm in cybersecurity," I'm always struck when people say, "Oh, that's really important." So I think it's that sense of working on something that really matters.
It's amazing. We hear today that cybersecurity is a top concern. What do you think that means, and why do you think that's important?
Well, we spent the last couple of decades connecting everything to everything without really thinking it through. And now, should we be surprised at the fact that people who maybe don't share the best of intentions are out there exploiting our love for technology for their own ends? So it really, to my mind, it's about fixing so many of the things that, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have committed those sins in the first place. A lot of the work I did in cybersecurity started off in the software assurance space. How to actually build technology that isn't exploitable from the beginning. But it really has grown, so much further. But it's really about, getting technology back so we have enough control over it that we can employ it safely, even in critical areas.
Cool. That's really neat. What other insight do you want to share that you think our network of cyber professionals would love to hear?
Well, I don't know if people want to hear it, but what I'd say is that the thing that's really animated me over the last few years is really this idea that if we don't understand what adversaries are doing, if we don't understand their behaviors, their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and procedures, we are going to be on the losing end of that equation, because the volume of pick on vulnerabilities, for example, exploitable or potentially exploitable vulnerabilities. As you look at CVEs, for example, there are just more CVEs than each year than any one organization, any one individual could reasonably hope to manage their assets down to no exploitable vulnerabilities. And if they tried to do that, they'd frankly be wasting a lot of time, because in many environments, and maybe in most cases, even the existence of those exploitable vulnerabilities isn't really important, because they're not truly exploitable. They require a certain kind of network access, or they assume an existence of a privilege escalation mechanism, which is not available, or it's a platform issue. So there is. So if we don't leverage an understanding of what adversaries are actually doing, not what they might do, not, what is in the realm of theoretically possible, which is important from a research standpoint, but most of us are not researchers. We're actually just trying to, keep the ship afloat. Uh, if we if we don't understand the most likely ways that adversaries are going to try to leverage their own insights to achieve their objectives, we're always going to be chasing our tails. So, in the work that MITRE has done, the foundational work that MITRE has done on the attack framework has been so important because it gives people a way of talking about what adversaries are doing. It gives them that language that says, hey, I think we're seeing, technique 1044 right now on our network. Oh, okay, well, let's do something about that. And it has meaning. The other thing I would say is if you look at the attack framework, it's kind of a wake-up call when you explain to people the vast majority of the 600 odd techniques and sub-techniques in that matrix do not require an exploitable vulnerability. The vast majority are things that adversaries, once they've gained some initial foothold, toehold in the environment, they're now, in many cases, living off the land, repurposing your own resources for their own purposes. They become that unauthorized remote administrator. And so recognizing that, so it's even if you had a completely patched, 100% patched environment, that's not enough. So we need a new approach.
That's great. I'm going to end with a fun question for you, Rich. What's your favorite piece of retro technology that makes you smile?
I've been thinking about this for days, and I was like, I want to say something like, oh, I drive a manual transmission, or I listen to vinyl, or something that would make me actually sound cool. But I realized this: the only piece of retro technology that that makes me smile are dry erase boards. Recently just started to go back into the office occasionally, and there's a whiteboard there. There are markers. And all of a sudden, we're up there writing on the board, and that makes me smile because ultimately, it's about people, communicating with people, and it's still the best way of doing it as far as I'm concerned.
Love it. And it's not the same using the Teams or Zoom whiteboard as it is just to get that marker and that smell. It's just, I love it. It's a great thought. So, well, thank you, Rich, for being on the Cyber Pro podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching the Cyber Pro podcast. Please like and subscribe. We'd love to have you following so you can get all the cool new updates.